Okay. Thank you very much, Dhruv, for that insightful report. And now we have a very special fireside chat with a legendary guest. Sunil Kant Munjal is one of the founder promoters, or is the founder promoter of the Hero Group, India's premier automotive manufacturing group that evolved from world's largest bicycle maker to the largest two-wheeler maker, which I'm sure we all know. He's also the chairman of Hero Enterprise with interest in insurance distribution, steel making, real estate, and corporate training. The Munjal Group has made strategic investments into several areas from e-commerce to hospitality. Mr. Munjal has supported startups on digital learning, community transportation, healthcare, women empowerment, and education. He's on several premier educational institutions boards like the Doon School and IMM Ahmedabad, and he's also a patron of the arts. And to speak to him, we will welcome Mr. Sudhir Sethi, who's the founder and chairman of Chiarate Ventures, India Advisors. It's a leading VC firm, as I'm sure we all know, with AUMs of more than $1 billion, an advisory board including Mr. Ratan Tata, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, and so on. Sudhir today serves as on the EC of NASCOM and is part of the advisory group on tech and internet economy, Minister of State. In 2001, he was recognized by Red Herring as one of the leading venture capitalists in the country. He has served on Impia Venture Capital Council and also on the executive committee of the IVCA, with more than 30 years of experience in various leadership roles at HCL, Wipro, and Cadbury. We welcome Mr. Sethi. Thank you very much.
Hi, Hansi, how are you?
Good, thank you. We look forward to this discussion.
Thank you for inviting me. Hi, Sunil. Can you hear me? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I can hear you quite clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Sunil. Thank you very much for joining. This is really a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you and get your views on the startup ecosystem. So a big thank you to joining us today.
Not at all. It's a pleasure.
So I think you've built enormously humongous organizations, leaders in their own field, not only in India and some of them on across the world. You've got now a family office, and which is investing in entrepreneurs. But before I ask that question, I just wanted to sort of set the scale at which we are right now. I know everybody knows the numbers, but we are doing some research on how the startup ecosystem looks today at an aggregate level and how we are sort of putting the crystal ball on and saying, maybe we think we can project how it will look in 2027. So some very interesting results came out. So if you permit me, Sunil, I'll take a few minutes to state that because that's fresh out of the box right now.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
The current startup ecosystem at an aggregate level, since 2007, 1st January, 11,000 startups have been funded by VCs and angels.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that, 3,500 migrated towards the next financing rounds. Out of that, 1,250 migrated towards the private equity rounds. Okay, so that's sort of state of the art in some. And today, all the surviving companies, and we're in the process of doing the finalization, but the revenue of these companies today is $20 billion. We estimate the market cap of these companies to cross $100 billion, which incidentally is around 3% of India's GDP. Okay,
that's very impressive. Very impressive numbers.
And that's, yeah. And I sort of go back and Chirate's own companies are at $1.7 billion, and we are at 0.6% of India's GDP. So scale is in the offing. Now, what made you, and I'll come to other questions, but what made you start a family office into the startup ecosystem, into technology, and how do you advise other family offices or semi-structured family offices to look at this whole ecosystem with the scale at which it is today? Because I keep getting questions like, is it too late? Is it too early? Is it too risky? Is it, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. So thank you, Sudhir. Thank you for inviting me, and I think it's a wonderful idea to have a conversation about a subject which is not just the flavor of the month, but I think is critically important for, especially for countries like ours. We are at a point where India needs to make up its mind as to where the next wave of economic activity is going to come from, and where the larger number of sustainable jobs will come from. And for that, the very existence of startups is an absolutely critical component to build the kind of economic strength that we're looking to build. As to our own entity, first, we do not call ourselves a family office. Just for your information, we call ourselves an investment office.
Okay.
Because family offices are often run in a very loosey-goosey fashion. And I don't mean to say it badly, because that's just the way they are. It's a little bit of surplus wealth lying in the, or whatever the quantum may be, large or small, lying on the side. And somebody in the family decides that we should put either a professional manager or one of the kids in the family to take care of some of our wealth. And that's how many of them get started. And also, incidentally, and especially in India, family office normally refers only to a very narrow slice of activities of what these offices do, which is the reason we chose to call ourselves the Hero Enterprise Investment Office. And we actually run a full-fledged, diversified end-to-end investment office, which focuses all the way from things like bonds and structured debt to VC investments to PE investments and everything else in between. So we are, in that sense, a reasonably organized financial institution. And that was the reason we chose to do this. And the purpose of doing this was twofold. One, as I said, India sorely and badly needs at this moment to get a leg up in its economic activity through industry, both services and manufacturing. And I found when we looked at this about, I'm going to say it's about 10 or 12 years ago, that there was hardly any risk capital available in the country. There were lots and lots of young and not so young people with great ideas, but were unable to implement them because they did not have any support system, did not have mentors, did not have risk capital or funding available, which is why I thought it'd be a good idea for us. So along with some friends of mine, we got involved the first, maybe the first angel network in India.
Right.
And then many of others came along, and then we went on to do some VC type funding. And then many of you guys came, fantastic VC funds, both Indian and global funds came in. And I thought our job there was done too. It was really more to trigger and get the system to get more depth and breadth at the same time. And so now we do most of the work ourselves. We did invest in funds ourselves earlier, but since our work is a lot to deal with entrepreneurs as much as we deal with fund managers, so we end up doing a lot of it ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you. Sunil, how do you, now you're dealing directly with entrepreneurs, you're investing in entrepreneurs, and how do you select an entrepreneur? And that's very important for many family offices who may not have that experience which you have right now, or investment officers, as you rightly said. How do you select an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so you're right. We do use a lot of the experience and exposure we've had running our own businesses to use as a filter for selection. So there are two or three things which are critical when we are making a choice. One is that the product and the service that they offer or propose to offer has a real felt need or potential for a real need. Second, that the founders need to be passionate about what they bring to the table. And it should not be just blind passion. It should be passion alongside some skill that they can impart to give the business a chance for success.
Right.
We are also quite concerned with how the business will be run in terms of ethics and integrity. We also like to only focus on those businesses which demonstrate a potential for leadership. So we have a few other criteria which are unusual. We also like to do things where the fallout, a positive fallout on society is an essential requirement for us to support any entity or business. So these are the non-financial ones. Of course, like everybody else, we do look at the business plan and the financial likely returns. But as you know better than me, business plans actually mean very little at that early stage.
At the early stage, yeah. Excellent. And obviously we do at Chiarate Ventures, and I see myself as IDG here. Can you please remove my IDG name and put me as Chiarate right now? Entrepreneurs, in our view, and I'm saying our view, and correct me if I'm wrong, in many cases when we saw the early, and I've been investing in India since 98 right now, we used to see this narrative of build to sell. And I'm seeing now companies, I mean, in our own portfolio, we have two companies racing towards $1 billion revenue right now. And the entrepreneur mindset is it changing to scale and last?
So the smart thing, at least what we advise all the companies we look at, even when we don't invest with them, is please build a business. Focus on the business. The buy, sell, IPO, post investments and all should be a secondary consideration. The primary consideration should be around the consumer, customer, and what the business actually brings to the table and what does it offer. If you can focus on that, the second decision becomes much easier. However, as you're absolutely right, in many cases, unfortunately, in a majority of the cases, the consideration starts from the other end. Is how can I get out of this quickly by setting up something which will make money in a hurry? And I think you actually lose the focus on what is really critical if that is your only aim. And which is not to say it's good or bad, because people have been successful doing that as well. But I do believe for the long-term benefit of what I mentioned right at the start as to why we are involved and why we got involved, why we stay involved, I think it's much better to build sustainable businesses, even if the management has to change at some point, which is okay. The businesses must be strong and sustainable and growth-oriented. At the same time, we also want entrepreneurs to be experimental. We want them to be adventurous. We want them to be able to take risks. Because if you don't, frankly, you're not going to do anything new. And if you try and do what you were doing, you will get what you got. You won't get anything new, and you won't get further from where you are. So for that reason, I think it's important that both the entrepreneurs and the support system of investors recognize that the risk that comes with experimentation and adventure is that some of them will fail. Some of them could do exceedingly well, and some may not. So it is important and critical, I think, that both sides begin to accept the risk that is attached. And this is the reason we call it risk capital, by the way. If everything is taped up and safe, you may as well be a regular commercial bank. You are not going to be a risk capital provider. I think we've lost Sudeep. So I can carry on and add a little bit more here. I think the other thing that is critical and important, and this, let me talk from both points of view. One is from the investor's point of view, and second is from the founders and the management team point of view. In our case, for example, we actively support founders and management teams, which is why it is important for us to have faith in their commitment. And we also want that the founders and management teams themselves should be able to trust the investors as well. So Sudhir, since you dropped off, I kind of went a little bit beyond your question to cover a little bit of
no, absolutely.
How I believe both management teams, founders, and investors, and the kind of relationship they need to have with each other. From the owners and founders point of view, I think it's important to be able to distinguish between ownership and management, because sometimes we get so close to an enterprise, we forget that for better management, there could be somebody other than ourselves who is the key and the absolutely correct team and individuals to manage. So I'll stop here and And
No,
back to you.
thank you. And I'm sorry, my network is a little bit patchy where I am. Um, one of the things which we've noticed, Sunil, is that as VCs, we invest in companies, and as companies progress, obviously some of them progress as the data showed. Once they reach a certain stage, entrepreneurs today are starting to think, can I build it for the long term? And that's a very positive, because companies should last over a period of time. And as you rightly said, if they're serving a purpose, which I think most companies do at the end of the day, for business or society, solving a health problem, solving a farmer's problem, then there's a potential to last longer. And it is a narrative which is seen in all reports, including IVC reports. How many unicorns are built and how many unicorns will be coming in? I think today another narrative is starting, which is how many companies have reached $500 million revenue, and how many companies have reached $1 billion revenue in the startup ecosystem, and how many in the next 5 years will reach $1 billion revenue as such. We believe in the next 5 years, there'll be at least 30 to 35 companies who will be reaching $1 billion revenue each at a run rate level. And that's a very healthy ecosystem which is developing. And these companies obviously, hopefully, should last longer.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. It can be no argument with this, because scale has a magical quality, as you know. Scale allows you to do many things which you otherwise cannot do. So for these very startup, which are fledglings at the early stage, the quicker they get to scale, the better the ability and capability to get high quality teams, to infuse more resources and technology, process, systems, audits, all those things which are necessary as an operation grows beyond a certain size and scale.
One question. We see our own data, 10% of our company's revenues at 1.7 billion is from international revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And not just SaaS companies in technology, but they're also in consumer companies now. In fact, two of our consumer companies are 90% revenue from outside India and not from inside India. We are seeing companies like First Cry going outside the country, Lenskart going outside the country, and many more. So do you think building such scaled companies, because India is a scaled market, it's the third largest contiguous domestic market in the world after US, China. It's India, and hopefully China is like somewhere there, but it's the second largest open market where companies can come and go. If that is the case, do you think international growth is something which entrepreneurs should think of seriously at a certain point of time, and especially in consumer companies, and not just SaaS companies? Is it going to be critical to growth?
So, in some sense, you answered the question yourselves, and I can give you an example of our own company, since you spoke of where we started from. If I look at our bicycle company and our two-wheeler company, Hero Cycles, and then Hero Honda, which became subsequently Hero MotoCorp, these became the largest companies in the world,
Right.
primarily with the market being in India. So India's scale is absolutely phenomenal. We have to both recognize and give credit to the market that we have here, that allows us to do a lot of experimentation with scale, which most other nations cannot do, except a handful of them. So should we be looking at international business? Beyond a certain point, both for diversification of risk as also for higher growth opportunity, absolutely we should. But is that the only way to go? It's not necessary. As I said, in our own cases, I'm giving you real examples, and I can give you 50 or 100 others, which operated not only but mainly in India and became large global enterprises. But going overseas has two other advantages. One is you learn a different set of work ethics, and you learn globally accepted practices. And I think both are important for us to learn and also to absorb, to bring back into our system in the companies here as well.
And quality.
Eventually, as you know, over the last 60, 70, 80 years, the globalization model we have followed has made us all interdependent, whether we like it or not. Now, with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, we know that the global supply chains, the global value chains have actually got damaged in many places, even though you have nothing to do with those countries directly. So it has both its advantages and its challenges.
What we've seen is, especially in consumer companies, as you rightly said, in SaaS as an example, the market in India still doesn't exist. So your SaaS entrepreneurs, in some sense, have a tougher job because they're starting from scratch and addressing the US market straight away. And in many cases,
Yeah, but also, Sudhir, because of the technology that they're using, because
right.
of the communication tool and technology tools being much more mature now than they were 15 or 20 years ago, it's actually easier to do some of those businesses today,
Yes.
sitting here than it was earlier.
However, 75% of SaaS companies have moved outside the country because they need to be closer to the customer. So I'm just shifting the paradigm to consumer companies in some sense, or marketplaces where India is a fantastic scale. Today it is scaled, right? If I'm taking our example because I'm familiar with them, FirstCry goes to UAE, becomes dominant. Lenskart goes to Singapore and USA, and now becomes a global leader. So today, consumer companies with the scale in India, some of them, not all of them, have now shown that they can become global leaders in their own right. And that enables them to even acquire companies and go to other markets as such. And that paradigm is a new paradigm because I don't think, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, if Amazon can come to India, so can FirstCry go to the US and Lenskart go to the US overall. And that's only a realization in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, so that's also about having a little bit more confidence in ourselves than we used to have 20 or 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
And I think that, yeah, newer entrepreneurs, younger entrepreneurs are clearly a much more confident lot. And by the way, this is not true only of this generation. I was reading something interesting the other day. It said the youngsters of today are insolent, impudent, and they talk back to their parents. And by the way, this is written 326 years ago.
Absolutely.
So, and as I said, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So we have to both expect and accept that every next generation of entrepreneurs will have better exposure, more access to data. And today, it's not just that it's changing, it's the pace of change that is changing as well. So that, in some sense, makes it both more complicated and easier to do these things.
Sunil, I'm going to make a request. I know it's out of the blue, but your experience in taking the group international is so precious. There are many scaled entrepreneurs who have companies at 100 to 500 million revenue today who think they want to go there. That experience will be so useful. Just a chat would be useful, and I'm going to reach out to you separately for that.
All right, we can do that sometime.
Coming back to capital. Now, all these companies obviously need capital. Rough estimates last 6 years, amount of capital invested in the startup ecosystem is about 200 billion. And that's invested, not raised, invested in the system.
Yeah.
Our belief is that the Indian capital, okay, is less than 5% overall. In the next 6 years, we believe that the total capital which will be invested in the country, right, will in the sixth year is terminating at about 100 billion a year, which is like 400 to 450 billion in the next 6 years. So it's a 2x increase which is happening. We also believe that Indian capital has hesitated to come into startups due to a host of reasons. Now, A, do you see this changing? B, what can the ecosystem do? What can players in the ecosystem do? VCs, family offices, alternate individuals, government. What can we do to excel? I believe Indian capital is very useful because Indian capital comes with enormous amount of experience overall, and
Absolutely, without doubt.
Without doubt, and it's next door. It's like the investor is next door, so it doesn't need to be passive, it can be active. What can be done? 3 things, 4 things to generate this 5% of Indian capital in the last 200 billion to something like 25% in the next 5 years. The reason being that China, if you look at it, 60% of capital is local capital.
Yep, absolutely right. So first, I think this is the natural curve that is on already. The awareness of families, foundations, investment offices, more institutions, etc., realizing the potential and the need, and finding ways to access it are clearly pushing more and more towards this. That it's low is very clear, and that's why there's an opportunity also, by the way. As I was going to say, this is both a problem and a good thing. And also, I believe that the success that we have seen over the last few years it has already generated a tremendous amount of interest. It also generates a lot of media. As you know, media look for sensational stuff. So anytime any firm becomes large or has something to talk about their numbers or their valuations, we hear about them. This was the same. We looked also at impact investing a while ago. And I was actually shocked to see how little money is going into impact investing in India from Indians. So, which is why we actually made some investments in that area to support goods and services also on the social side to improve societal needs. And I think if you can build this as a combination that you meet society's felt needs and also build first-class enterprises based on that, and therefore standout returns, I think that is a true win-win for all concerned. But recognizing that you will not be successful or make fantastic returns every time. In fact, you will make losses sometimes. But as long as in the balance you are positive at the kind of returns that you're looking for, I think India has a tremendous opportunity. We do forget that India is not 1.4 billion consumers, by the way. The actual consumers is less, but even that, as you said, is one of the largest growth markets in the world. It is also critical and important that we find ways to access the bottom of the pyramid, because that has two reasons for us to doing it. One is defensive, because if you don't do it, it's one patently unfair to have people living that quality of life. And it's also dangerous because they can turn to crime and all kinds of practices which are not socially acceptable. On the flip side, which is the plus side, you can and you will build the world's largest growth market, by the way, bigger than Europe, bigger than North America, and that is a true possibility.
I know we're running out of time, but just want to mention one thing. The impact, as you rightly said, is a stream which is very powerful today in India. I also see people like us starting to realize in a big way that outsized returns is one side of the coin, but influencing or serving businesses where there's a felt need in consumers is the other side of the coin. And today, for instance, our thinking in the last 5 years is that there's 1 billion people in India who need efficient healthcare. How does technology serve efficient healthcare? There are 1 billion people who need insurance. There is 150 million farmers who are struggling with productivity and crop disease and water management and etc. soil management. And so the list goes on and on. So this is a humongous market, and technology can really, really serve the purpose. So we are encouraging VCs to see the other side of the coin and say, go solve problems, because that's what an entrepreneur does anyway. And you're funding. So in some sense, the VC is the R&D engine of the country. Money goes inside the company, whereas the public market is outside the company, and solving real problems.
You're absolutely right, by the way. And that's one of the reasons we stay involved in this, because I also believe, and I have actually spoken with many, that we need to look at currency in many different forms, not just in the rupee and dollar return. This is currency too.
Yes.
Improvement in the human quality of life index, improvement in sustainability, improvement in health and education. These are phenomenal currencies, because the multiplier on this, by the way, is much higher than the direct rupee or dollar return that you've got. Please understand what that does to your market, to your intellect, to your intellectual capital availability, to resource of productive individuals. Because just saying we have so many people is not good enough. We have such a large number of people who can be productive, who will get trained, who will be educated and skilled to be able to take on the roles and jobs which we need, not just today, but which the future needs for us. And I think that is why it is absolutely important and critical for us to not just push, but to push with a sense of urgency. And that is why I'm delighted that the government, right at the top, from the Prime Minister onwards, has repeatedly now talked of this as one of India's new big initiatives. Therefore, the financial support, taxation support, infrastructure support, the ecosystem support. I don't think we are quite where we need to be, but we are well on our way.
Yes.
And folks like yourselves and others in organizations like the one we are now on whose platform we are sitting on right now, need to continue to provide input to the policymakers, to the regulators, to ensure that you have a clean, clear path for growth, at least for the next 25 to 30 years. Please note what I'm saying, not 2 to 3 or 5 years. 25 to 30 years is what we need, and you can have a completely transformed nation, and truly it will tap into its potential to be where India needs to be.
With outsized returns, no question.
Absolutely. No, that's by the way, a natural outcome.
Yes.
All I'm saying is you do not even need to focus so much on that. That has to be a natural outcome. But if you look at all of the currencies that I'm talking about, the return is beyond one's current imagination. The potential for return is that. But for that, you have to be both smart, often patient, and very collaborative in how you work. So networks connecting to networks, firms connecting to firms, institutions connecting to institutions. That's one of the things we do, by the way, in all our investee companies, is we offer them a platform to connect them to anything that they're looking for. Any kind of problem that they have, or any idea that they want to bounce off somebody. So we offer them our knowledge, our experience, our connections to let them get to places which they otherwise on their own may not be able to.
Yeah.
I think that's the role which the ecosystem needs to play.
One last statement and advice from you. India has money. I think I'm very passionate about the fact that India has a lot of money, and I don't believe that's not true. Just the 5 top IT services companies in the last 5 years, dividend distribution and share buybacks was $27 billion, by the way, in India, right? And that money went into real estate. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's went to real estate and public markets. Maybe 5% of that came into new startups. With that statement that India has capital, any message for ultra high net worth individuals, family offices, encouraging them? I know you've encouraged them already, but any steps they should take to ramp up their exposure to the startup world through any mechanism? So
actually, you're right. I encourage many of them all the time, by the way.
All the time,
so through the Confederation of Indian Industry, we've set up a platform called ICON, where we are connecting industry entrepreneurs, industry owners, industry managers to the entire startup ecosystem. So I'm actually doing this in multiple nodes. We are doing this through our university, the BML Munjal University is doing this. We are doing this through a new tie-up we've done in Ludhiana. We are now starting off, in fact, a new initiative to encourage startups at various stages only based on arts and culture. So we are actually not just looking at the old overall system. We are also trying to deepen some of the areas which are not getting enough attention and which frankly have a crying need for those who have the ability, the resources, and the wherewithal. Because we have to do it for our own sake, for our children's sake, for the future generation. And by the way, we must have fun doing it. We must enjoy it. We must make it a fun activity. And what I like is many of the entrepreneurs are madly passionate. So they're not working. They're just enjoying their life. And in the bargain, creating goods and services which meet a need for society. And by the way, create outsized return for their investors.
Thank you very much, Sunil. Thank you so much. With these last words, I really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you again.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, IBC.